Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Andy Green has joined me in the studio today. Welcome, Andy.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to see you today. And our audience loves to get to know our guest in our first question. So please tell the audience a little bit about yourself and where your current focus is.
Thanks, Andrew. So my current job is Chief Exec of Chichester College Group. Chichester College Group is a group of 7 further education colleges in West Sussex and Brighton and Hove. So we have Brighton Met, Worthing, Northbrook, Haywards Heath, Crawley, Brinsbury, our land-based campus, and Chichester. We are a 120 million turnover organisation with about 28,000 students, 3,500 staff. We have some commercial businesses as well, some nurseries, warding bodies, a whole lot of commercial bits and bobs in there as well. So it's quite a vast organisation. I started out my career doing a chemistry degree. I had quite a sort of traditional route through school sixth forms. I didn't know about further education colleges at that time, which was interesting. I'll come back to that later. And then on to university, I did a chemistry degree, basically because careers advice in those days was, what's your best A-level? Chemistry, we'll do chemistry then. Having realised I didn't really like the white that I'd have to wear as a lab coat for the rest of my life, I decided to branch out into something else. And I joined House of Fraser as a graduate trainee and worked for them for about 3.5, 4 years on Oxford Street, which was a great training. And then moved to Boots and then retrained as a teacher in 1996. I'd always wanted to be a teacher. In 2000, I was promoted to my first vice principal job, and then I've spent 28.5 years in FE. Absolutely love it, absolutely adore it. Didn't know about it until I did my teacher training, was sent on a placement to what was Brighton College of Technology at the time. Absolutely fell in love with the life-changing opportunities it provides and have been in it ever since. So my current focus is around consolidating the merger. Since 2017, Chichester College has merged 5 times, and we've grown from a 40 million organisation to 120 million organisation. So bringing those cultures in line, improving the quality, improving the experience for those students, our learners, our customers, as I like to call them, has been my real focus and continues to be so. And obviously making it a great place for staff to work as well.
Love that. So thanks for the quick run through. And we'll obviously deep dive into that later on. And I'm really interested in this episode because there's so much focus on the education sector in the UK at the moment for the audience that are listening to this from abroad as well, where there's pressures around political pressures, lack of resources, technology, attitudes of students, special needs, all this kind of stuff. It's just a hodgepodge, isn't it? So I'm looking forward to going into that later on. But I won't let you get away first. You've done what most of our guests do, which is absolutely right. Tell us about your professional journey, but tell us about your personal interests. What do you do when you're not?
I like to run my own businesses. Some people play golf, some people play squash. I like to run my own businesses. So I run many businesses since I was age 19. I ran my own youth theatre, big decorating business. More recently, 2011, I bought Brighton Film School and grew it rapidly and then sold it to a venture capitalist company. We then opened a lingerie boutique that my wife ran for 5 years. I currently have a coaching company called The Authentic Leadership Coach. And I have a property company as well. So those are the sorts of things. I love film. I love theatre. I take 2 groups of students every year to the Edinburgh Fringe, and we perform on the Edinburgh Fringe. I act as producer, and the staff come along. We produce 2 amazing shows, and I love that because it gives me the opportunity to work with young people on a project and see how they grow in confidence from point A to point B, and that's really, really important to me. And I go to the gym 3-4 times a week and really enjoy that sort of whole lifestyle. But family is really important to me. Family is the most important thing to me, and that I live my life by one value, which is about trying to make a positive difference to other people. And that's come from a whole load of sources, which I'll talk about later, but that's really important to me. And family is the bedrock of that.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad I asked the follow-up question. So what I love about today is I'm going to be hearing your journey through those lenses of the education sector itself and the difference you're making to young people, but also this entrepreneurial side of you, that's obviously how these other businesses that you've been involved in.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it. So let's get started with where this all came from. I'm convinced that every single person born around the world has the ability to lead themselves effectively over time, given the right circumstances. And we're all affected in different ways and shaped by our early experiences. So tell us about your early journey, childhood role models. How was your sort of earlier years?
Yeah, I think this is such a great subject to delve into. And I do a leadership program with my managers at Chichester College Group, where we look at all those influences from, birth onwards, etc. And so having considered the answer to this question, there are lots of people that influenced me from a very young age, my father being one of them. My father was very successful. He was a vice principal for a foreign exchange bank, worked in the city. In the city before they got paid lots of money, unfortunately. So I didn't have I was very comfortable and lucky growing up, but not the millions and millions of pounds that city workers get these days. But he had very high expectations. He wanted us to do well as the three children to do well and become professionals. So he's a big influence on my life. Obviously school teachers are a big influence on your early life, etc. And that inspiration of that. I got into performing arts from the technical side very early on. I had some big influences there in terms of my experience of going to festivals and running shows and being responsible for shows and those sorts of things. I think my father, who sadly died 8 years ago, he was brought up as a man in a household which he wasn't able to share his emotions. So he couldn't talk about his emotions very well. And I think that when actually my big sister was a primary school teacher for her whole career, and then I went into education as well, I think maybe it was a little bit of a disappointment for him. And he'd often tease me to say things like, "Oh, you only work half the day, and you get half the year off anyway, don't you, teachers, etc., etc." And I know that he was just trying to be funny, but I don't really think he understood the sort of impact that would have on me. But I think what it did do is it gave me that incredible drive to be successful, which led to one or two things, which I'll come to in a second. But I think uh, he was driven, he was hardworking, and he absolutely worked crazy hours to support his family. And I absolutely adopted that value from him in terms of supporting your family. He also worked a lot in the community in terms of the church and other sort of village community. And that really resonated with me as well in terms of that importance of being kind to your community, part of your community, helping out and adding value. And that's what I try and teach in my staff and students now in terms of that importance of making a positive difference, etc. How far do you want me to go with this story? Do you want me to carry on?
Yeah, carry on. Yeah, carry on.
So I think that my strive was always to make him tell me he was proud of me. And he really struggled to say those words. And I think that drove me on really, really hard. And I think in my early, I was working, 8 till 8, trying to get this promotion, trying to really push for this promotion to make my dad proud, to support my family, etc., etc. And it nearly broke me, to be honest. And I had my mother likes to call it a nervous breakdown. It's a bit of an old-fashioned term, I guess, more of a mental health breakdown. And I had 3 months off work, and I had an amazing counsellor, a little old Irish lady, who said to me, "You're incredibly lucky to have this now." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'm having a massive crisis. Why am I lucky?" She said, "Well, most people have this when they're 40 or 50. You're having it in your early 30s. You can now change the rest of your life and be a much better person and be much more prepared for this." And I was like, "Well, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense." And it really taught me actually that leadership is all about the outputs, not the inputs. And I say to my staff now, I don't care if you work 1 hour a week or 50 hours a week, as long as you're delivering on your key deliverables. And that really focused my mind in terms of I was working 8 till 8, but also having an impact as a leader. And actually, it's about the outputs. You've got to count the outputs. So I can work 2 hours a day and have amazing output, or I can work 8 hours a day and have the same amount of output because I'm not as focused. Do you see what I mean? It just sort of makes sense. And so I thought that real focus, that what happened to me at that point has actually really set me up substantially to be a success in the second half or the rest of my career, in a sense, because it taught me that really valuable lesson about one, outputs, but two, looking after yourself. And there's a saying, isn't there? Put your oxygen mask on first before you can help anybody else. And you absolutely have to look after yourself, because if you can't be resilient and you can't be there for your team and your other leaders around you, then what example, what example are you setting? But two, how are you going to support them if they need help, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to look after yourself. So we do a lot of work on health and wellbeing. We won a Association of Colleges Beacon Award for our approach to health and wellbeing for staff and students, because it's so fundamentally right. So fundamentally right. And one of our key priorities is for it to be a great place to work. And that's really important. I want my staff to come to work thinking, I love working here. This is amazing. Now, we're not there. I won't, claim that we're there, because we're not, because workload in education is pretty horrific, and we're trying to do as much as we can. But as you said earlier, we're completely underfunded. We're underpaid. Teachers in FE are paid 20% less than they are in schools, which is just criminal. So there's a lot of work to go. But those early experiences really taught me that actually it's about outputs. It's about looking after yourself, about looking after your team, and making sure there's resilience and well-being in the workplace.
Brilliant. So what I want to do now you set that up for me, if it's okay, is I want to split this conversation going forward into pre the burnout, if you like, and that event that you had where you were supported by the counsellor, and then post. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So if we go to the pre, so we're talking about in your 20s here, if not before, where you had this mindset that you've described and the reasons behind that. And yet, because I've been there as well, and many people listening to this will be there as well, there are plenty of success outcomes that come from living life that way and keep driving yourself. So I just want you to be able to articulate to the audience, what were those things that you were seeing? Why did it then feed you to keep doing them? And what were the things that maybe you were ignoring during that period that then led to that place that you got to in the end?
Yeah, I think, as I have this saying that you can only experience experience. You can't learn experience. You can't be taught how to do a certain thing. You have to experience. If you stand up in front of 20,000 people and make a speech, you can't learn how to do that. You have to experience it. And I always tell a story about when I was first deputy principal at what was just Chichester College Group. I was asked to unfortunately sack a member of staff. It's the first time I'd done it. Emotionally, I was really torn up by it, because it was a really sad case, but there was no option. We had to do it, et cetera, et cetera. And it was really tough, and it sort of hit me emotionally. But the second time I did it, it hit me emotionally less. The third time I did it, and it's not that I'm callous or cold in it, but your body learns how to experience, how it learns how to respond to those emotions you're feeling because you've been through that experience. So I think trying to link that back to the sort of pre breakdown or burnout, whatever we like to call it. I think it was really important that it was about that. It's the experience that you're gaining through what you're going through, in a sense. And I think sort of lost my train of thought now, but I'll get back on track in a second. So it was about driving. My father's high expectations are driving me on, and I thought that the more hours I put in, the more successful I would be. But it's absolutely not the case. It's about working smarter, not harder. It's about impact. It's about quality of your life. It's about quality of your well-being, et cetera, and those things that you value. And I think, when you're young and ambitious, it's quite, it's easy to get sort of wound up and think, "Oh, I've got to do this, this, and this," because you don't know better. You don't know otherwise. You don't know, you haven't had that experience to go, actually, if I keep doing this, I'm going to break, and that won't help anybody. And there's loads of research out there, isn't there, Andrew, that says, actually, people that have a proper lunch break actually are more effective for the whole day. Rather, if you work through your lunch, you actually become less and less productive in the afternoon. It drops off. So if you have a proper break, it goes back up. So we really encourage our staff to take 20 minutes, half an hour, walk out the building, do something else, go for a bit of exercise, whatever it might be, kinesthetic break, to sort of really drive that productivity. And I think you don't know that as a young leader. Nobody teaches you that. Nobody tells you that. It's interesting. I'm quite lucky because I've worked under a lot of principals, and an early principal who I won't name was an absolute bully. And I always teach, when I do my leadership training, I say you can learn as much from a bad boss as you can from a good boss, because I very early realised that wasn't the boss I was going to be. When I worked for Boots the Chemist, I had a terrible floor manager. She was a bully. I was bullied by her, and that taught me that I never wanted to be that type of leader. I would never be that type of leader that just bossed people around and told them to do this. It was cold and hard and all those sorts of things. So I think all of those early experiences formulate this sort of sphere of experience and sphere of feelings about how you want to be as a leader, what you want to be as a leader. And you take all those and you put them in a little box, and it formulates over time. My eldest son, who's now 27, when he was 7, he was diagnosed with ADHD. And that was a really tough time as a family, because he was really struggling with his ADHD. We were told the best we could ever imagine was keeping him out of prison and he wouldn't get any qualifications. I was like, well, I'm not having that. So again, we worked really hard to get him the support they needed, had to battle with every school, every educational institution. And that was draining. It was incredibly draining. And actually went on to get 12 GCSEs, 3 A levels, drama school degree, and he's working as an actor and a PT, and he's doing brilliantly. It still has his moments, obviously. You never get rid of ADHD, it's there. But that also formulated my leadership qualities because it taught me that actually every single person deserves an opportunity. Every single young person, adult or apprenticeship, deserves an opportunity. We're totally inclusive at Chichester College Group. So if you want to come here, you can come here. We turn nobody away, regardless of your educational needs, regardless of your medical needs. Everybody can come and we'll find you the right course. And that permeates right across the institution. That's really, really important to me. And that's come from my experience as a young father, fighting and fighting and fighting for that access to that fair education for my son.
Thank you. And you've obviously benefited as well more recently and create the environment now where it's safer for people to raise their hand and say, look, I need some support here. And obviously it's not always been that case in the past. But where we are right now, bear in mind the experience that you had in your 20s and into your 30s. What advice would you give to people out there now that are maybe in their 20s or 30s and they're resonating with you? They're working really hard. It's getting to a point where maybe they're plateauing, their well-being's not good, and yet they're trying this on their own. It's all from that position of I rather than we or us at the moment. What kind of advice would you give?
I think you've got to look at what you're doing and what your own personal values are. What do you really hold dear, and what are your personal values in terms of what are you trying to achieve? What's your purpose? So I said earlier, I believe my purpose is to try and make a positive difference to other people, to look after my family, provide for them. And so, what do I need to do that? I need to stay well, actually, because if I break, what happens to my family? What happens to my mission, my purpose in terms of I can't do that, I can't deliver it. So I'd say to them, try and talk to someone who maybe has been through it, listen to your podcasts to understand what it feels like and actually talk to someone who's had more experience. And, I've been coaching, I coach a lot of people and I love coaching people because I can share that experience. I can share that way of working in terms of refocusing your efforts. I'm working with a CEO of a charity at the moment and, we've done some amazing work in the last year, how we've changed their own perspective on what they think they should be doing to what actually is impactful. And so I think it's finding the appropriate support. It's having your support networks around you. Make sure that you can talk to your family, talk to your friends, find things that will give you time to reflect. I say to all my teams, build in at least an hour of reflection into your weekly schedule, because that's really important. Because if you don't sit and reflect on what you've done that week, what you've done that day, my PA puts an hour in at the end of every day. Doesn't always stay there because things get busy. But an hour of every day for me to just think about, right, what did I do today? Did it all work? What do I need to prep for tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera. So there are little techniques you can have to really focus. And I go back to that. What's your impact? You're working 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, but what impact have you had against your KPIs or success measures, whatever you like to call it?
I love what you shared there. There's a great book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown, where he talks about every single person listening to this, you and I, really only have about 8 to 10 things that we can do every day to be successful that only we can do. And when I ask people to list those out, they usually get 8 or 9. And the last one, by being reminded, is actually, I need to look after myself. Of course, we're the only ones that can do that because we're there for other people, want to make sure our families are okay, want to make sure those people around us are okay. And so I'm really glad that you mentioned that first because so many people forget to look after that.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, let's move on to then post you getting the counselling. And I'm really interested in this transition period here. I'm sure that, again, people listening to this and watching this would be interested. So take us back to that. You had the counselling. They told you were very lucky. You've got a lot of your life left, to rebuild from this. So just talk us through that transition and then what it led to.
Yeah, I think I was very lucky that I had a couple of really good friends that basically sat me down one day and said, Andy, you're not okay. You're not right. What's going on? And I then went off to the doctor and got signed off and had the counselling, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that when you have that time to stop and reflect and realise and, uh, they diagnosed me with chronic fatigue actually is what the issue was. I was working 8 hours a day and then looking after my son and family, et cetera, et cetera. My wife had become very ill at the time, my first wife. And, I hadn't got anything left. That was it. I hadn't got anything left. I was empty. So I rebuilt myself from that base and I promised myself that I would never do it again. And so it was about really thinking about how I was going to sort of rebuild from that in terms of rebuilding my career projection, what I wanted to achieve, my purpose in life, all of those things. So it was about that journey on, I guess. And yeah, it was about that realization that you didn't need to work all those hours to be successful, and actually being comfortable with myself, learning to love yourself. I read a book, Power of Now, and all about being in the present moment. You can't change the past, and you can influence the future, but why are you worrying about the future right now? Just be in the present moment. Present moment is really, really important. It's hard to be in the present moment all the time, but you have to really try to do that. And actually, my son, after a couple of his regular episodes of mental health, sort of really found Buddhism and Jainism and all those sorts of things, meditation, and we sort of went through that together, and that really helped, etc. As we start to sort of rebuild that sort of resilience, I guess, to build that resilience up. And I'm lucky now that I can recognize when I'm starting to get overtired, I absolutely recognize those signs and they're right, okay, now I need to go to bed at 11 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock, or I need to take a half day off, or I need to go and spend a bit longer in the sauna, or whatever it might be. So it's learning and understanding those signs, because your body will tell you. A physiotherapist said to me recently, pain is our friend. It's like, what? No, because it tells you, it's telling you something's wrong. And then then you can fix it. Until you feel that pain, you don't know it's wrong.
No, I love that. And just remind the audience as well, as you were rebuilding and having this new sort of reset into the way you wanted to live your life and still be ambitious in that sense, but do it in a different way. At what stage did these other business interests start to increase or kick in, so we understand that what was going on around?
Yeah, so 2011, I bought Brighton Film School with a colleague. He was a film industry expert, filmmaker. I was an educationalist. We said, we found this little sleepy little film school that was turning over about 80,000 with about 20 students. We said, well, why don't we offer degrees in filmmaking, et cetera, et cetera. And we grew it over 5 years to a 1.1 million turnover, and then I sold it to a venture capitalist. Unfortunately, my business partner died of cancer recently, so he's not with us anymore. But bless his soul. But it was an incredible experience, and that did involve working evenings and weekends. But it was something I really, really enjoyed. It was a real passion. And people kept saying to me, "How on earth are you doing this? How do you work?" I said, "I love it. Absolutely love it. I loved, doing a cash flow forecast, or raising a bit of finance, or finding another partner to finances, or buying some new equipment, going and meeting the students. The success of taking I really love that. I get my adrenaline rush, I guess, is when I take something from a conceptual idea to something that's like the end product. So when I take my Edinburgh shows from that initial idea, right, what show should we do? How are we going to do it? To the production, love it. The same with the film school, right? We've got this idea. Sat in a pub with Gary and said, "Should we buy this?" He was like, "What? You crazy man?" I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And we raised the finance and we went away and did it. That's my adrenaline rush in doing those things, getting those things off the ground and turning a sort of concept into a thingy. So, but it was all about managing. And again, that was about impact, isn't it? It's about managing those hours, not pushing yourself too far, understanding the signs, realizing the signs. But if you're loving what you're doing, it doesn't feel like a job. And I'm really, really lucky. And I understand I'm really, really lucky. Not everybody else is in that position, but every morning I get up and I put this badge on to be the chief exec of Chichester College Group. I am so proud and honoured to run this organisation, and I love it. And some days it doesn't feel like a job. Some days it does feel like a job when I'm dealing with the government, but other days it doesn't feel like a job. And I love it. And there's nothing more special than seeing those young people come in scared and nervous, and and then see them leave 2 or 3 years later, and then you turn them into an awesome human being. We talk about that's our job, is to turn them into awesome human beings who go on and get their dream job or dream university place, and that's what we do. So it's about finding that passion within you, I think, and that passion drives that energy to keep you going.
Good. One thing I'm really interested in, because of all the things that are going on and this passion and level of interest you have in all the various things around you, when those things come into your life and then you're working all these hours to do it because you enjoy it, how do you make sure then that you recontract properly with the other stakeholders, obviously at the college and other people in your life, around that time commitment, the way you need to be differently with them, the way they see differently? How did you go about that?
I think it's about balance. I think it's about balance. And I think if I said to my wife, I want to spend every hour outside of work with you, she'd run a mile. But it's about finding time, isn't it? Prioritization, finding time. And I have a saying at work, I've had a saying all my life, family comes first. So if a member of staff says to me, can I have Friday morning off because I want to go and see my kid in the nativity play? Absolutely, of course you can. Family comes first. Oh, my mum's ill, I need to go and see her. Absolutely, family comes first. Yeah, we've got this really important meeting. So nothing is more important than family. Go and see them. Because I know if I do that, when Ofsted come or there's something else, they'll give me tenfold back because they know that I've really prioritized that family comes first. And I think, what I do is I prioritize around those issues, and family definitely comes first. And if that meant, when I was running the film tour, if that meant I was, answering emails at 11 o'clock at night, I was answering emails at 11 o'clock at night. The family came before that. So it's about prioritization, I guess. It's not saying it's easy. And I think, people will say, God, you're crazy for running having a full-time job, being an entrepreneur, having a family, but I just love it.
I can see that. I can see that. And as you're in this next part of your life, and I'm 55 now, so I'm obviously towards the end of my career. I'm still enjoying every minute of it. What are you still going to find challenging, you think, from a leadership perspective? So either self-leadership or leadership of others during the next 5, 10 years as the environment around us changes?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it earlier about government policy. We've got a new government in place, so there's a lot of turmoil. I say the only constant in FE, further education, is change, because it just changes all the time, and we've got more change coming. We're not funded as well, so dealing with that side of the policy and the lobbying and those sorts of things is always a challenge. And I think that one has to manage one's emotions. I think a really interesting learning. I had a fantastic coach several years ago, and she really taught me that actually we can have an emotional response to a situation, or you can have a factual response to a situation. And as a leader, you need to show passion, but you can't always show emotion, because that weakens you in a sense. So she taught me how to recognize that emotion coming up and how to hold that emotion down, so I wasn't giving an emotional response to a various situation. And my boss at the time kept saying, "You're amazing, Andrew. You're a brilliant leader, but you need to take the emotion out of these things. Don't think emotionally. Think factually. What's the right thing to do, etc., etc." And that was a really important learning for me, actually, because when I'm dealing with politicians, I could get quite emotional, because sometimes it's very frustrating, as you can probably imagine. But I don't. You can't get emotional. You have to be factual. You have to be reasonable. You have to be respectful, etc., etc. So that's a challenge. I think managing my team is a joy. They're an amazing team. I think they get frustrated with the way the system works, and the funding and the lack of funding. The staff feel they're not paid enough. I've now got staff who are, as the real living wage keeps increasing, they keep squeezing the scales up. So I've got staff who are, don't feel they're paid the value they should be paid, and we don't get funded enough for me to give them a massive pay rise. They were trying to do everything we can. So managing that emotion and that response to staff and keeping them happy, and the morale is always a challenge, but it's one I really enjoy. I talk about authentic leadership a lot, and how important it is for me as chief exec to get out and about. And I do that a lot, though not as much as I would like, because I have a lot of other things to do. But I think, yeah, those are the sorts of challenges going forward. I think I'm 56 and I don't like it. And so I'm then deciding, well, what do I do now? Do I work till I'm 60? Do I work till I'm 65? What do I do? So I'm sort of starting to have those internal conversations with me, to see what's going to happen next.
Thank you. I want to take advantage of your insight here now, if this is okay. It's really interesting because of the age I am. A lot of my clients that I work with, and like you, I do a lot of coaching, and they, are either in their 40s or 50s. And what I'm really sensing at the moment is some resentment building in that age of leadership about this kind of perception around privilege and entitlement in the people. That's not fact. That's what sometimes is existing in the mind of that generation. And yet they're obviously having to employ them. And there's this disconnect that's happening. We've heard about JP Morgan bringing everyone back into the office, etc. So what's your advice for people like me and others out there who are dealing with this and this internal resentment? I had to go through the hard yards and the hard slog like you did in your 20s and 30s to get up this greasy pole. And these people don't behave in this way.
Oh, I know, absolutely. It's fascinating, isn't it, Andrew? I mean, the attitude of the generation. I can't remember whether it's Zen or Z or whatever it is, but whatever generation it is now, it's almost, for some of them, not all of them, because we do tend to group everybody into the same pot, don't we? For some of them, they really are hardworking and dedicated and passionate, etc. But some, I think, feel society owes them a living. They, when we talk to all of our employees, we work with about 3,500 employers locally. We talk to them about, what skills do you want? They say, well, actually, we don't really worry what the qualification is. What we want is someone that's going to turn up on time, have a great attitude, be able to use a phone, be able to add up and write, and be a problem solver and a team builder. And actually, for 10 years at Chichester College Group, we've been embedding all of those skills within our programs, because it is so important. And it is about making these awesome human beings. And attitude is the most difficult thing to change. And I think I go to the Association of Colleges National Conference every year. There's a great speaker there this year that talked about the fact that people will leave a job now just because they don't like it, as opposed to you and I would leave a job when we had another job, so we could go to another job, so we could always be earning money. But there's a generation now that goes, I don't like this job, I'm just going to leave. So what are you going to do? I don't know. I'll find another job. Do you know what I mean? And it's hilarious. So we really try hard to instill those attitudinal qualities within our students, because it is really, really important. And I talk to the students about how important their CV is, and we focus on giving them opportunities to volunteer, to travel abroad, to go on overseas trips, to go out to employment, work experience, meet employers, all those things, so they can learn all of those things and how important that is. We see such dramatic change in these young people, adults, apprenticeships, when they do that. But it is a challenge to employers to find those people who will be the person who has the right attitude for that job. And it's just remarkable. I think it's so alien to people like you and I, because it's just not how we were DNA programmed, were we? But I don't quite know where it's gone wrong. This speech at the AOC conference also talked about the latest sort of addiction being attention, because young people need attention all the time, don't they? On their phone, watching the TV at the same time as watching their phone. My kids do it. I'm like, are you watching this? Yeah, but you're on your phone. Yeah, I can do both. Well, I can't do both. How can you do both? But it is hilarious.
Absolutely. And it's a really interesting issue that organizations are dealing with and will. So it's great that, obviously your college is trying to address these issues. So I've got time for one final question, Andy. And it's a bit about looking at the future now. You've referenced, you're not sure next 5-10 years, where your future might lie in terms of career. You're enjoying what you're doing right now. But if we just think holistically and back to this purpose again, what is it that might be out there for you to do that you've not achieved yet? Something that you're thinking, yeah, I'd really love to grab hold of that in terms of leaving a legacy.
Yeah, I think that I want to. I mean, we're due an Ofsted inspection any day soon. That we were outstanding in 2014, outstanding in 2020. I'd like to make it a hat trick and get it in 2024. Fingers crossed. I mentioned before I've started my coaching business, and I've been coaching people to help them through similar difficulties or organizational change, personal development, personal change. So I'd like to build up that side of my portfolio. I'm a trustee of 2 charities. I'm a chair of trustee of 1 charity, which I love. Again, that's part of my purpose, giving back. So I'd like to take on a couple more sort of portfolio-based things as maybe I start to retire. My kids say, you're never going to retire, you'll be bored. You'll be bored in 10 minutes. So I think retirement for me is about having the choice of what I do on that day, as opposed to having to go into the office. And that may come in 5 years, it may come in 10 years, I don't know. But I think that's about that choice. So it's about continuing to fulfill my purpose, about making a positive difference through different avenues, not just necessarily my main job. I think that's the direction of travel for me.
Super. And I've got one more question because it's just come to me now. And it links back to what you said before. And it's more a personal question. If you had the ability to travel back in time, incognito, and you could go and meet your younger self who was feeling that way they were feeling about their father, what kind of advice would you give them to say to them, look, it's all going to be okay. I've turned out okay from where you are right now. What one piece of advice would you give them?
I think my advice would probably be try and be more patient, because I'm very, very impatient. Now, some people say that the positive side of being impatient is drive, and it is. Absolutely. I'm very driven, and that's why I'm so successful. But actually, patience, I lack patience, and therefore I want to get things done now, et cetera, et cetera. But I think I'd say to my younger self, be patient. And actually, my dad did say he was proud of me when I sold the film school and made a load of money. He said, oh my God, I'm so proud of you. And it's like, oh, fine. Bless his heart. Yeah, so be more patient. That's what I tell myself. I try to tell it myself now, let alone my young self.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a fantastic place to finish, Andy. I really appreciate you being on the show today and really sharing your vulnerability around what happened to you, in your 30s and those 2 highs of your life. And yeah, it's been really illuminating. Thanks for being on the show.
It's amazing. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.